Right.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence. I'd ask you to keep in your thoughts and prayers the brave servicemen and women serving our country, both here and abroad. And in particular, we have our first Assistant Chief of the Northland and Hearst Fire Department, Corey Finn, who's just been notified that he's being deployed to Kuwait. And we also ask that you keep in your thoughts and prayers the brave men and women of the country of Ukraine and all that they are going through currently. Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Would the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Mineta.
Here.
Councilman Martinez.
Here.
Councilman McSweeney.
Here.
Councilman Gregory.
Here.
Supervisor Schaefer.
And I am here. So all five are present today. Just by way of information and explanation, this is the May 11th meeting of the Babylon Town Board. There's three sections to the meeting. First is dedicated to the public hearings. There's two public hearings scheduled for today. If you're interested in addressing the board on either of the public hearings, we ask you to come up front, fill out a card, file that with Jen. And when you do come forward to the podium, we ask that you state your name and address for her benefit. And then you'll keep your comments to 3 minutes. One of the hearings involves a application for a permit, so that there'll be a little more flexibility there with the applicant and his or her representatives being able to make a presentation. Residents can then come forward and ask questions or make comments. And then we give the applicant or the representatives the opportunity to respond to the questions or comments for a full public record of the on the application. There will not be any action on that today because we're just here hearing the application for the first time. The second portion is dedicated to the agenda, and the agendas are available on the table up front. So if you're interested in addressing any of the items that are listed on the agenda for today, we ask that you fill out a card as well and come forward, address the board from the podium, keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if you're here for something that's not on the agenda today, that's the open portion, and that's when you can come forward and address the board as well. If you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, because this is 2022, you can click on the link below that brings the agenda up. If you're interested in addressing the board on any of the items on that agenda, you can send us an email, and one of us will get back to you to answer any questions you might have or respond to any concerns. You can't comment during the live portion of this meeting. Now, we don't have the Zoom capability with that. This is just a actual video, live video. And if you're watching it at a future date, you can still use that same link and send us an email so that we can get back to you about your question or comment. So with that, we'll go into the public hearing scheduled for today. And the first public hearing, which is a public hearing in reference to the coastal erosion hazard area variance of Donald Gelastino, 117 Savannah Walk, Oak Beach, Suffolk County Tax Map number 0100-243-01-100. The way I'm going to do this is I am going to be recusing myself from this. I'm going to ask the clerk to accept information. At the time, I received an email on October 26, 2021 at 8:23 p.m. And this came from Mr. Gelastino, the applicant. And it was, I'm just going to read it into the record, then I'll present this to you for the record. Hope you're well. I'm having what I feel is a serious and soon to be legal issue with the town of Babylon. I was discussing with a few friends, David Levine of Par Group. I was out with Tim Sini and Mike, president of RXR, last week, and several others who mentioned I speak to you or the town attorney before I take action regarding a town of Babylon issue. Matter is very simple. I filed a permit for the dock in Oak Beach. There are over 48 docks to the direct left and right of my home. My beach area is one of the only ones left which does not have one. It took over 1 year through COVID, et cetera, to get the final from DEC, et cetera. And then I'm advised per the below email, which is clearly not legal, that based on quote unquote a few neighbors who don't own waterfront like I do, my permit will not be issued. Maybe we should meet in person before the lawyers, et cetera, and get this fixed. See below email and attached approved DEC permit insurance from my contractor. A nice picture of Tim, Mike, and I. Thanking you in advance, Don Gelastino. And it included the documents that he mentioned, plus a picture of 4 people, including the district attorney at the time. So I sent this to the town attorney because at the time that district attorney was conducting an investigation into the town of Babylon and into me in particular. And I didn't feel comfortable with receiving the email. So he suggested that I submit this as part of the record and that I would recuse myself from any future vote if this matter did come before the town board. As I said, it's not coming before the town board today. And so I'm going to hand this up and make it part of the record. But I will recuse myself when it does come, if it does come up and when it does come up. So with that, we're going to ask the applicant to make a brief presentation to the board. So who would be representing the applicant?
Hello, for the record, my name is Alan M. Stein. I have my office at 8 Woodedge Trail, Quogue, New York. I do have co-counsel with me today and another witness.
Do you want to identify them?
Yes, we have. Why don't you come up and, for the record, give your name, address, and who else
Sure.
is going to be here.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jennifer Porter. I'm an attorney with Chiesa, Shahinian, and Giantomasi with offices at 11 Times Square, New York, New York.
Great, thank you. And did you have
Yes,
someone
there's
else?
going to be Ronald Abrams is our expert witness.
Okay,
and
and which one
when-
is Mr. Abrams? Mr. Abrams, just if you would identify yourself for the record.
It's Dr. Ron Abrams of Drew Associates.
Great, and you have an address?
Yes, that's 40 Hitching Post Lane in Glen Cove.
Great, thank you. Okay, so you want to,
You want-
all right, you're going to make the presentation? Thank you. And you need this, right?
We will need that.
Okay,
We do have a PowerPoint presentation to accompany Dr. Abrams' presentation.
okay, great.
So
Go
again,
ahead.
good afternoon. We are here on behalf of the applicant, the Gelastino family, in connection with their application for a dock that's proposed to be located at the front of 117 Savannah Walk in Oak Beach. The Gelastinos applied for a permit back in November of last year, which was denied on the basis that variance relief was required under the coastal erosion requirements of the Town Code, Chapter 99, and specifically sections 99-10B3 and 99-10B4. The criteria for granting variance relief is very specific and clearly laid out under the Town Code. We believe that as a matter of fact and as a matter of law, that relief can be satisfied. And today we have with us an expert in the field of ecology who is here to give a PowerPoint presentation. He also did, in connection with preparing for this hearing, conduct a site visit and studied various documents which were obtained from the Department of Environmental Conservation as well as from prior town records in connection with other variance applications and other coastal permits that had been issued in the past. He did prepare a formal written report. The report contains 15 pages of his analysis, which will be the subject of the PowerPoint in which he'll walk through. It also contains many other pages, 3 appendices, which include specifically all of the FOIL documents for the entire file from the DEC permitting process, so that all of the review, all of the correspondence, and all of the analysis that was done in connection with the issuance of that permit can be presented and part of the record before this board. Another section of the report contains pictures and photographs from his site visit and his analytical data, as well as aerial photographs of the particular frontage over time and the groins, which he'll walk through with the board. And lastly, it contains FOIL documents from surrounding properties, specifically in relationship to dock permits that have been issued over the course of the past several years within properties within 1,000 feet of Mr. Gelastino's property. So without further comment, unless the board has any questions for me, I'm happy to qualify Dr. Abrams. We have brought copies of his curriculum vitae if the board is so interested.
You can just submit that.
Great.
Any questions from members of the board? Okay, Doc.
Dr. Abrams, could you please state for the board your professional and educational background?
Yeah, well, I have a master's in biology and a PhD in ecology. And well, I've been consulting for 35 years. And before that, I was a supervisor in New York DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife. And before that, I was in academic research for about 25 years. So yeah,
Great. And have you previously testified in front of boards in connection with applications, particularly applications for docks in relationship to coastal erosion and coastal hazard areas?
yes, I have. I've appeared in front of many of the boards throughout Long Island and the tri-state area on waterfront structures and impact assessment.
Okay. We would ask that the board accept Dr. Abrams as an expert in the field of ecology, which he'll be testifying on.
Yes, you are accepted.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the PowerPoint, and the IT was in and set up.
Here's our IT now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
I was asked to look at the entire case from the beginning to the end and to understand what the situation along Savannah Walk was. And so what I did was I obtained as many documents as I could from the applicant himself. And then the team performed FOIL requests to the state and town. So what I'm going to talk about now comes from my experience as a staffer at DEC and then as a consultant dealing with the three levels of agencies that usually have jurisdiction over waterfront projects. The Gelastino family applied for a dock in an area where docks are common. The DEC, in my opinion, did a very thorough review. Okay. Arrow's not responding.
Wrong PhD, you want technology.
Well, okay. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there we go. The DEC's responsibility for reviewing projects on waterfront is really comprehensive. And in reviewing this project, after a series of revisions required in order for the project to comply with the standards of the DEC's regulations, the DEC concluded that this dock would not cause any adverse impact on marine food production. It would not reduce the resources for wildlife, fish and wildlife. It would not alter the function of the beach or the groins for flood, hurricane, and storm control. This dock is for recreational boating activity. The cleansing of ecosystems involves filtering of water, in this case through the sands, and the dock would not interfere with that function under the regulations. The dock itself will not degrade the absorption of silt and organic material, again, really part of the cleansing of the environment that beaches provide. Now, this is a private site, so education and research is not expected to happen there, but in terms of how this property fits into the big picture of the region, the dock will not alter its role. And so if research is done and in some cases private lands are involved, there would not be an adverse impact to that function. And finally, the DEC does consider open space and its aesthetic appreciation. The dock has as low a profile as is allowed, so it won't alter the view shed along the beach any more than any other dock that exists along that entire shoreline. And access through the site will remain for pedestrians to walk past the home, as is the case with many other docks along that stretch of the coast. Sorry. DEC's permit review process, including the initial consultations with the consultant that was helping the Gelastino family, took almost 2 years. And through that review, there was a series of changes to the plans. He started out fairly aggressive, but the Part 661 standards require consideration of coverage. You can't have too big a structure that has potential for impact. So he stepwise reduced the size of the dock to what the DEC agreed with. The structure itself, he started out looking for some kind of floating facility that would have space for maybe more than one boat. And they backed him up. They made him use a standard structure, a pile supported elevated catwalk, so to speak, and space for a boat or maybe a second boat, but primarily just space for one boat. The DEC did receive comments from proclaimed objectors, the Forcelli firm representing some people, and a consultant, Land Use Ecological Services. And in those documents were concerns expressed for the depth at which the dock would terminate, the ecology of that part of the shore, and the potential for erosion of the shoreline as a result of the project. And so if you think back to the prior slide, these regulatory standards and concerns are reflected in how the DEC answered for themselves that first page, that the project complied with all of the required priorities of the DEC. So the results are the initial project was reduced in size and scale and made to be what is a typical dock that's permitted by the agencies. They were assured by several methods of, I think there were at least 2 or 3 surveys submitted, that they would reach the dock would reach the proper depth, which is 30 inches of water at low tide, so that boats don't bottom out and scour the substrate. And each section of DEC drew their own conclusions that the project was in compliance with those protective priorities. Bureau of Marine Habitat Protection issued their findings. The project met those standards. Division of Fish and Wildlife concluded there were no protected species impacts associated with this project. And the Permit Administration answered step for step. And in my document, I did go through each and every date I could find in the DEC's process in responding to comments that were submitted and issues that were raised. And they drew their conclusions. Obviously, they issued the permits. But I went to the property myself to take a look at the key issues, and go to the next. The beach pedestrian access question is not new to the Oak Beach area. I looked at how it was solved in the past. I looked at the current conditions and noted that there were concerns for this in the past, and there were solutions found for people to build their docks. The protection of the area's ecology, the wetland permits issued by the federal, state, and then eventually your town government are charged with protecting the resource. And I believe the Army Corps and the DEC did a thorough job. I did look at the current conditions there to draw my own conclusions, and I'll show you that in a minute. But docks are a common structure around Long Island, and there are standards by which the agencies operate that create a situation where people are entitled to recreational boating access using the appropriate design technology. And In the end, after, like I said, a series of revisions, the consultant for the Gelastino family got it right, and the permits were issued. Shoreline stability is an important issue, and we're dealing with an area where the Army Corps has been working on this issue since the 60s. And I will talk about that in some detail just now. But the docks are presumed to be acceptable under agency guidance, and the local history shows why. We have lots of docks on Long Island, and they have not caused any kind of catastrophes when they're designed according to the agency standards. Okay. So here, let's take a look. Riparian access. There's lots of docks out there. It's got a long history. Next one. The groins were installed to control shoreline erosion and sand movement. And they have succeeded over time, but they were never designed for pedestrians to walk through them. So each little beach cove along the Oak Beach area has its own area for activity. But the idea that you could walk the entire beach area, well, I think maybe that's why the community beach cove, which is the next one over that pile of rocks, that's been kept open, and that's nice for people to walk on. It doesn't have cables. It doesn't have docks. That's one. But this cove and many of the other coves along Oak Beach, there's a cable you got to walk by. There on your left, you'll see, I think that's 97 Savannah Walk. The solution was put a stairway over the dock so people walking the beach can step over the dock. Mr. Gelastino's property, the dock will come flush to the beach at the top end. And while the town may ask him to put a set of steps over it, they aren't really necessary, but I'm sure he would be agreeable to that. So the pedestrian access along the beach is not a genuine concern. There's been solutions in the past, and we have that for the future. Next one. The docks have gradually replaced these mooring piles. They're a hazard. You got to wade out, or you've got to drag your boat in and beach it. We don't like beaching boats. That scours the bottom. If you have to wade out to your boat and you have to carry your family and your stuff out to the boat, well, that's an inconvenience, but it can become a hazard if you go for a day's trip and the weather changes and you come back and it's really rough. You better have a dock in that case. And that's why people have been installing docks along the shoreline, all shorelines. Next one.
And remember to check the weather first, probably.
The weather changes quickly.
We were doing well. Let's stay doing well.
The beach cove in question does not contain any of the myriad of ecological threats and endangered species that were claimed by the objectors. What you see here is beach grass edged with looks like blocks. And in the background, you see some Phragmites, but there's no marsh habitat. There's no ecological conditions that are threatened by the addition of the dock here. Next one. On the beach and in the water, I found seaweeds and rockweeds. There are no special submerged aquatic vegetation, and there are no sensitive marine habitats, again, in this cove. Next one. The beach has some organic material mixed in with it. We got organic debris from worms, and I found no special aquatic organisms. Next one, please. I did perform 3 meter squared samples of in-fauna. Those would be things like the clams that you see laying there on the beach. I found some hard clams. I quantified them. Those data are in my report. And what I found was a lower density than average, but they're present and they're fine. And I think we would find that condition all along the Savannah Walk shoreline. Next one. All right, so the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on stabilizing this shoreline for a long time. And I'm going to run you quickly through a series of aerial photos to show that despite a lot of controversy, they've achieved a pretty good job. Next one. here we are in the 60s, and they've just constructed these groins. And you can see that the sand pattern shows an effect of sand and water movement. Next one, please. And gradually over time, next one, they begin to smooth to become the beach shape that you have now, the crescent beach shape that you have now. Next one. And you can see how now we're up to 2004 and it's fairly stable. And those beach coves probably look very similar today. Next one. Even through Superstorm Sandy. Next one. They're stable. And a dock or the docks that are present, like the one on the right, which is close to a neighbor not far from the Gelastino family, those docks do not alter the function of the groins and the protection of the shoreline. Next one, please. So some claims made by objectors. One set of claims about the submerged aquatic vegetation was based on a statewide map. And there you can read for yourself. If your project is or action is within or near any of these zones that show up on this generalized map, you need a permit. And if the agency reviewing your permit thinks there's a problem, there's a potential impact, then those may need to be addressed. Well, DEC performed their review and carefully and received the claims from these objectors and rejected them, having itemized and considered each and every one. Next one, please. Here at the federal level, there was a general objection and a claim that there were sensitive habitats and protected species. Again, where that came from, the Essential Fish Habitat Database, it says right there, this is for general interest only. If an agency thinks that the spot is important to some species, they're going to require a location-specific evaluation. Well, the Army Corps of Engineers looked at this case and said, nah, there's nothing there that's out of the ordinary that would obstruct the creation of recreational boating access. And so after careful review, they issued their permit. And that's my presentation.
Great, thank you, Doctor. Is there anybody else for the applicant? Okay. So do we have cards? Yes, you need to fill them out, but I'm gonna have Mr. Porcelli come up. I'm sorry?
Want to fill the cards out after him?
No, could you fill them out now so that we'll have them ready to go?
Can I grab and give them out, or do they, you want them?
You can grab and give them out.
You
Sure.
mind? Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Excuse me. My name is Jeff Forcelli. I'm a partner in the firm of Forcelli, Deegan, Tarana, 333 Earl Ovington Boulevard, Uniondale, New York. And I represent the neighbors, many neighbors who live in the area and are opposed to this application. I heard Ron Abrams' remarks, which he went through, and I have a couple of things that I would point out, besides his general report being an overview of how things are done and the assumption that DEC does things very carefully and very well. I agree with a couple of things he said. One, that 30 inches at low tide for a boat is absolutely what's needed. You don't want a boat on the bottom, and our expert will testify to that. We're in agreement with Ron Abrams. He mentioned in there that there were 2 or 3 surveys that were submitted. We'll talk about those surveys, because surveys sometimes are not surveys, or certainly not ones that are required by a municipality. And as far as DEC goes, many, many years ago, like 1972 or 73, I was a young attorney and I was working with the state legislature in Albany. And that's when they passed the Environmental Conservation Law and the Tidal Wetlands Act. And I was counsel for a Long Island legislator who was very important at the time. And there was a lot of complaints and comments and so on that DEC was going to take away jurisdiction from the local municipalities in terms of waterfront. So my co-counsel and I, at the instructions of our legislator, had added to the legislation, which is section 25-0401 of the Environmental Conservation Law. This sentence was added after saying that DEC gives permits. It says the permit issued by the commissioner shall be in addition to and not in lieu of such permit or permits as may be required by any municipality within whose boundaries such wetland is located. And the reason that was put in, I can tell you firsthand, because I was involved with it, was that nobody trusted the state. The municipalities wanted to make sure their own areas were protected. So I understand these other permits were given, but I think this really is a de novo. You can't just rely on what they did. So now, if I might get into our presentation, the permit asked for a walkway for a boat mooring. Sometimes it's called a 4-foot by 110-foot recreational pier. I think that's what it was advertised for. But I think it's more than what was advertised for. There's going to be boats there, so we have to be concerned with depth. Now, we have an aerial photo, which is our exhibit A, which shows the area. And this, of course, is Savannah Walk, and these are the other houses close by. The building application requested the 4-foot by 110-foot walkway for boat mooring, and was described as boat mooring was described as the work. Now, in your application for permits, the instructions provide surveys signed and sealed by a professional engineer, existing and proposed elevations to be shown in USGS datum, which the later version of that is NAVD 1998. And it needs to show those elevations. The coastal erosion hazard variance application a variance is required because the construction is prohibited. So they need to create a variance. Now, interestingly enough, in the variance application, there are two questions that were responded to amongst many, but I think these two are interesting. One is state a complete statement of relief, variance, or special use requested. The reply was, quote, dock/pier to properly safely access a boat personally and for handicap. Then in question 6 said, what is your practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship? And this is an interesting concept for a variance. We do not believe the existing zoning regulations are applied to this property, as most neighbors within the waterfront currently have docks and boat lifts. Well, the law doesn't not apply to something because you think other people have docks. The law applies to you. That's why they're here for variance. And secondly, about most residents having docks, I think our exhibit A relies that. Now, the next thing, they are required to establish practical difficulties and unnecessary hardship. Now, practical difficulties and unnecessary hardship is a term that has been tried to be defined over the years, and it was codified, but it basically has, it's sometimes hard to define, but people know what it is. And there's a case in New York called Fust v. Foley. It's a Court of Appeals case.
Sorry, say that
Higher-
again.
Pardon me?
Say the title again.
Fust, F-U-H-S-T, v. Foley. Get it out. And this case involved putting an extension on a house. And the Court of Appeals said in that case, in the vast majority of cases concerning area variances, the courts of the state have been confronted by situations in which the unique characteristics of the land itself are such that literal application of the zoning ordinance hinders practical utilization of the property. Okay, we understand that. Conceitedly, petitioner does not now contend that the denial of his request for a variance places him in a position of having property or a structure located thereon.
Can I just interrupt you a second? The microphone that you've got there, is that making that noise
Not plugged there.
or are we being invaded? Which might be a good thing.
Must be the AC.
Put on that microphone.
There we go.
And it concludes with petitioner already has the use of a one-family residence, which has been developed for that purpose and for which he presently occupies his family. So in other words, in this case, variance was turned down. They said, you already have a reasonable use of your property. You're not entitled to a variance. Now, if that's a standard, let's look at the use of this property. Does it have a reasonable use? Well, it's a one-family house, like others in the neighborhood. The property was expanded prior to 2020 without the benefit of a DEC permit. DEC then went through some kind of a regulatory proceeding and issued a warning letter and which resolved the matter. And whether he ever got a permit or not, I don't know, but they resolved it through the administrative process. The second thing is, and it's in the papers that I submitted, the property is rented out to third parties, as will be shown. As shown, there's an advertisement in that group of papers, and the residents who are here will talk about it. Third thing, which is very interesting, and it's also in there, if you look at the survey of the property, if you look at the west side, there's an encroachment. You can see the encroachment beyond the property line. There's a survey in there and it's marked in yellow. So the property not only has the use of its own property, has the use of the adjacent property to the west. And if you look in there and see the survey, it's marked in yellow where it encroaches. So in view of that, I think there is a reasonable use of the property for many reasons, and there's no need for a dock. There's no basis under the law and under proving practical difficulties and unnecessary hardship for a variance. Next, Mr. Abrams spoke about 2 or 3 surveys. We just happen to have them here, and I'd like to ask Greg to put them up. Although the application form says you have to have a signed and sealed survey with data, this is what was submitted. And this was prepared by Ocean Consulting, who was their consultant, but it is not signed, it is not sealed by a Lancet professional surveyor or engineer. So it's just a sketch. And the interesting part is if you look down here in this yellow, it says from depth survey dated 7/14/20 by W. Hogan. In other words, these depths that he's gotten here, he says comes from a depth survey that someone else did. So this is really doesn't tell anything about depths because it relied on something else, and we'll get to the next one. So next, I'd like to put up as our exhibit the survey that the so-called depth survey that they got their figures from. from depth survey of Hogan. Here's Hogan's so-called depth survey. This likewise is not signed or sealed. And it was referred to as a depth survey, but it's where Mr. Hogan do this, and it is not signed and sealed. It says all elevations on the NAVID 1988 data, July 14th, 2020. So this likewise is this, I guess, is one of the three that Dr. Abrams was referring to, is not signed and sealed, and it talks about NAVD 1988 datum. NAVD 1988 datum is an elevation. It's a program that was established to create uniformity in surveys for elevations. It's not a depth survey. It basically, NAVD stands North American Vertical Data. And basically wants to keep all surveys in sync so that you can't have one house here at elevation 10 and one at 5, depending on your survey. So it's meant to do that. So the information that's on here, the alleged depth here along the water, I submit they're not depth of the water. What they are is elevations pursuant to NAVID. Now, just to support that, we'll be giving you the information that we have on that NAVID. Now, if you look at this survey, let's take mean low water. I've been on a lot of beaches, more years than I like to admit, but low tide, there's no water. Low tide is zero water. Then as you go in the water, it gets deeper. Yet on this document, it has mean low water, minus 0.83, minus 0.79, minus 0.94. So according to this survey, at mean low water, the water is almost a foot deep. That makes no sense. Makes no sense whatsoever. So I submit to you, this is not a depth survey. It's an elevation survey in accordance with North American Vertical Data. Now, but we do think, and we agree with Dr. Abrams, you got to have 30 inches at dead low tides, so a boat is not going to be scouring the bottom and hurting the ecosystems. So in view of that, we said, you know what? They didn't do it, but we're going to do it. We went out and we got a survey. Well, let me go back. Once we got a survey, and that survey is our hydrographic map. I'm taking these a little bit out of order, so I'm confusing Greg here, but he'll have to put up.
Well, you sign his check, right?
This is true. But anyway, now this is a hydrographic map. This is what tells what the depth is. This is not relying on figures from Sandy Hook, New Jersey, or what elevations are. This says what depth of water is. You know, we talked about surveys and we talked about all the things that DEC did, but nowhere was this. So we did it. My clients did it and paid for it. And this is a survey that was done. This means someone goes out at low tide and measures and puts it on a survey. And you can see here, here's the corner of the house. Here's the pile, 141 feet for the pile. And at the pile, the depth is minus 2.6. It's 110 foot pier. So everything north of that, and quickly it goes to 1.9, 1.5. You don't have it to 30 inches. It's just not there. It's not there. This is the only survey that shows the depths. Now, another thing is going on there, and I'd like to show you. Now, this is Mr. Hogan's survey from 2010. Now, and this one is signed and sealed. The 2020 survey. Mr. Hogan's, and it's the same property. When you look at it, you say to yourself, what's going on here? What's going on? Here's the 2010 survey, and you got your line from the northeast corner to the high tide mark. It's 103.88 feet. The west side, 121.40 feet. Now, the survey unsigned one, and I have trouble using an unsigned one, but I'll show what he says. Now, here's the east side, 113 feet, and the west side, beyond the 121, he doesn't close the survey here, and we estimate it's about 130. Now, how is that? Did he fake the survey? Did he make a mistake? I don't think he did either. I think what he did is he saw what's going on out there. What's going on out there, and you'll hear testimony from our clients about it, is accretion has taken place. Accretion is when there's a buildup of sand, mud, or soil due to accretion, which is the process of the water. So the fact that the high water mark now is 10 feet closer to the water means that accretion is occurring. What was underwater 10 years ago now is part of the beach. So now that accretion doesn't just happen there, it happens all the way out. So even if the 1988 NAVD datum was correct at the time, it's not correct today. Because since 1988, just the last 10 years, there's been a tremendous amount of accretion. So I submit to you, the only true and accurate picture of the underwater land is the survey we submitted. And then, I didn't have a PowerPoint, but I give it my own way, the old-fashioned way. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And we just happen to, we didn't take pictures of a lot of things, but we tried to take pictures of things which we believe are very meaningful, of what it looks like at low tide. Here you can see. Here's one picture. Here's the hole at 141 feet. You can see all the mud and undulating surface there. There's another picture. What comes close in this house. I showed this to one of the zoning lawyers in my office yesterday, and she said to me, "They're gonna put a dock there?" So that's basically what I had to say. And I think I'll conclude my remarks with the surveys referred to. The only one that has any value in terms of the depth is the hydrographic survey, which we had done at our expense. Everything else doesn't even comply with your requirements in your application form to submit. And now, just to further our presentation, I'd like to call Chuck Bowman, who's our environmental expert.
Mr. Supervisor, members of the board.
Good to see you, Joe.
Yeah, Charles Bowman, Land Use Ecological Services, 570 Expressway Drive South, Medford, New York. Pleasure seeing you today. I'm not going to rehash a lot of what Mr. Abrams had said. I've been working in this field since 1981, very long time. Worked for all the communities on Fire Island, New York City, all the way out to Montauk. Have probably done thousands of docks. And what Mr. Abrams had indicated as far as the procedure that DEC goes through is exactly correct. No doubt about it. And when you apply for a dock under Article 25, Tidal Wetlands Regulations, one of the first things that has to be submitted is a depth survey reference to low water prepared by a licensed land surveyor. Now, Ocean Consulting, who did the original application, is not a licensed land surveyor. I'm not a licensed land surveyor. Mr. Abrams is not a licensed land surveyor. And that's all fine. That's why we all go out and we get a hydrographic survey to be done. What DEC did not understand, and maybe I could bring up Mr. Hogan's survey up on the board. In fact, if you could take those photos down. I think Mr. Forcelli alluded to the fact that the original one, yes, is that Mr. Hogan did a topographic survey, elevation survey, like you would have on your house. Okay, at the front porch, it's elevation 5. I'm going down my driveway, it's at elevation 4, and I'm heading into the streets, elevation 3. Great, and all the surveys that we do on Long Island now are referenced as, what shall I say, to NVD and NAVD, which is a datum. Meaning, where is sea level? Sea level being 0 in that data. He uses that data and he shows elevations in the house, on the property, at the high water mark, and the different locations. But he takes those elevations out into the water. He doesn't see how deep the water. He didn't walk out there and say, there's 2 feet of water here. He said the elevation of the bottom of that is X. Now, if you were to be developing a dock plan from its elevations, you'd have to convert that elevation to depths. That was never done by Ocean Consulting. And it's certainly, I know Mr. Abrams would probably know better than that, but it was not done. It was not converted. And that's why we looked at this and decided, well, we really need an actual depth survey to see what's accurate. Just because something was submitted to DEC, it's information in, what do you get out? If you give them the wrong information in, and they're sitting there looking at this one that says -2, -3, -4. Looking at it quick with all the permits they had to process, they were assuming that's a depth of water because that was submitted with the application. And it was shown as such on Ocean Consulting's plan as water depth. It's not, it's an elevation. So when we came back to look at that and came to that conclusion, we had actually a hydrographic survey done by Robert Fox. And just so you know, Robert Fox, that's all he does. Hydrographic survey all over Long Island, New York City. He has very high tech equipment. He's got GPSs. He goes out there, and you can see by the amount of information he put into this, he just didn't go out and stand in the water and see what it is. He ran transects to see where it was. He actually located that pile, which we all have been talking about, as 141 feet tied it to the house. And if you compare that to Hogan's survey, the pile on his plan isn't even the right place. The elevations are scattered all over. So I always question whether or not someone actually went out in the water to do that. Regardless, Mr. Fox's survey, when you go out to 110 feet, that would the dock would be at, you only get to 1.5 feet of water. That's the problem. It's, again, information in, permits out. If I gave to the town building inspector a plan that was showing an addition and it wasn't accurate, and I built my house, whose fault is that? The building inspector was taking the word for it. DEC was taking the word for it. So I think the board has to look at whether or not there's enough depth here, regardless of DEC, and also looking at your CHA regulations. This is, according to Chapter 99, this is a nearshore area. Nearshore area is very valuable habitat. Not disagreeing with Mr. Abrams that there was no submergent aquatic vegetation that I saw there. It really comes down to the depths of the water. And the docks are generally, not generally, they're always prohibited in CHA. Most of the CHA is along the ocean. It's along Island Sound. This is a pretty unusual situation where you're actually in the Atlantic Ocean, but you're inside an inlet and you're in CHA. But the regulations still say it is a prohibited activity that will require a variance. Now, I think Mr. Fertilli has gone through the criteria for variance. From my point of view, from an ecological standpoint or a regulatory standpoint, I think you really have to look at what the standard is. The standard is 30 inches, 2.5 feet to have your boat. If Hogan's survey, which again, I'm having my doubts about, can be updated to show actually in the hydrographic survey, reference to low water, and it's got to be reference to low water, showing the depths. But I think the photograph that Mr. Forcelli showed at low tide, that pile shows it. It's very interesting. You see that pile? The pile's in about 1 foot of water. So our hydrographic survey is actually quite accurate. Here's the pile. Here's low water. Obviously, their survey is incorrect. So I think my advice to the board, if you were to go through with this, is to ask for an actual hydrographic survey. Ocean Consulting didn't do it correctly. It was submitted to DEC incorrectly. And in order for the town to be able to properly evaluate it, you should have the correct information, as is shown on the survey that we sent by Robert Fox.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. Mr. Pacelli, you have anybody else on your team?
Yes, we have a number of residents.
Yeah, I'm going to get to them. They just filled out the cards, but no other professional experts.
No,
Okay,
that's it.
thank you. Yeah,
Yes, the applicant did want an opportunity just to respond.
to respond to that, yes, and then we'll get to the residents. Yep.
Just with respect to some of the comments and some of the testimony that was provided, Mr. Forcelli went through at great length the variance criteria with respect to the town board and focused heavily in terms of the standard with respect to that variance criteria. The code expressly lays out the criteria to be met by the board for purposes of granting the variance relief. And I think it's important at this point to walk through what that criteria is. And what we would like to do is have Mr. Abrams specifically address each of the variance criteria and how it is or is not being met for
So do
purposes
you
of
want
the
to bring
board.
him up to the?
Yes,
podium
we
with
would.
you? Yep.
But before we do that, I just wanted to note that in the expert testimony, they indicated that all docks are prohibited essentially, and that is not true. The code within the town allows docks. It just regulates docks of a certain size. So for example, if this dock were to be smaller, it would be allowed and it would be permitted. The fact that it is at the size that is being provided is what triggered the need for variance relief, and which is why we're in front of this board. It's not just having a dock in and of itself. So I think that that's an important distinction to be made. And with respect to the criteria, there are three general standards which should be met. And Mr. Abrams, the first criteria states, a coastal erosion management permit will be issued only with a finding by the administrator that the proposed regulated activity, A, is reasonable and necessary, considering reasonable alternatives to the proposed activity and to the extent to which the proposed activity requires a shoreline location. In your professional opinion, and why is it reasonable and necessary?
Well, I think it's necessary for safe navigation. And as I said, when you have to go out to a mooring pile and you have elderly people and you've got to either drag the boat in or ferry the people to it, they'll have to wade to it. That's just not a family-friendly recreational boating experience. It's not safe. And I will repeat, weather changes pretty quickly. And so if you're out for the whole day and you come back, it's reasonable to have a fixed structure upon which to land your boat.
The next general standard under 99-9 states is not likely to cause a measurable increase in erosion at the proposed site and at other locations. You did address this in your initial direct. Could you please address it again?
Yeah, docks do not, in and of themselves, if designed according to accepted standards of the agencies, do not cause erosion. The commentary about accretion here, 5, 6, 8, 10 feet movement of sand is common along the South Shore. That's what prompted the Army Corps to build the groins. And so the attempt to confuse you with where the high water line was, etc., it just, you know, the need for a dock is accepted and not causing erosion in and of itself. And the movement of sand is a natural process. And as I showed you in the aerials, those beach coves are fairly close to what they've been for the last 15, 20 years, and they're basically stable.
Okay, and the last general standard, 99-9C, indicates prevents, if possible, or minimizes adverse effects on natural protective features and their functions and protective values, existing erosion protection structures, and natural resources.
Well, the DEC's analysis of the beach here and the erosion potential and the stability of the shoreline reflects what's in your own code. They looked at the history, they looked at the conditions at the site, and they saw that this is a relatively stable area. Throughout the whole area, docks have been installed. You don't find further down the beach, you have an area, one of the coves has 3 or 4 docks. That cove is no more susceptible to erosion than a cove that has no docks in it. And the agencies have been watching this for a long time, and your code reflects essentially that you follow the same approach as the agencies. And in what I've written and submitted to you, I itemize that in great detail. Not sure if you want me to go back and read you my pages, but I think you'll see.
No, it's already part of the record.
Yeah, I think
Right.
you'll see that the information is in there.
And then next, I'd like to walk through section 99-18. Mr. Forcelli did speak about practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship, but the code specifically calls out 5 criteria that must be evaluated in the context of whether or not that variance relief can be required or met. And I'd like to walk through those criteria as well. So specifically, the code provides standards for variances. Strict application of the standards and restrictions of this chapter may cause practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. When this can be shown, such standards and restrictions may be varied or modified, provided that the following criteria are met. A, no reasonable, prudent alternative site is available.
Well, the only alternative is to continue dragging this family in and out. And as you know yourselves, many families have gone to fixed piers for recreational boating access. The alternative is to continue what's been going on, and it's not a very family-friendly or recreational boating friendly approach. It's what was there historically. It's not the way it's being done now.
And I believe Mr. Gelastino had previously indicated he has elderly family members.
Well, yeah, and young kids. I mean, you don't, you certainly don't want to risk harm to a small child because you've got to drag them in and out 100 feet to get to the boat.
Okay, and under B, all responsible means and measures to mitigate adverse impacts on natural systems and their functions and values have been incorporated into the activities designed at the property owner's expense.
Yes, the original proposal was a bit aggressive, and the DEC shaved it down to the standards that fit with Part 661. So they have taken the action necessary to mitigate potential impact, and that's how the agencies drew their conclusion.
Okay, under C, the development will be reasonably safe from flood and erosion damage. I know we addressed this briefly.
Yeah,
before.
no, if it had been a set of floating docks, they are subject to moving and causing damage by ripping free and washing up against other properties. So the fixed pier catwalk was the instruction from the DEC, and the applicant followed that.
Okay, D is the variance requested is the minimum necessary to overcome the practical difficulty or hardship, which was the basis for the requested relief.
Yeah, the minimum necessary went beyond your as of right size. It had to go out to the proper depth, and it did so. And I think we should tell you that all of the talk you just heard about the various surveys was submitted to the DEC. In fact, the Forcelli firm submitted a letter after the DEC permit was issued with the new survey, and the DEC looked very closely at it. And I should probably read this into the record.
Yes, please do.
So it's dated September 1st, 2021, from DEC's Region 1 to Jessica A. Lease at the Forcelli Deegan Tirana Law Firm. Permit number 1-472-04635/0001, Gelastino property, 117 Savannah Walk, Oak Beach. Request to reconsider and or revoke permit. Dear Jessica Lease, the Department of Environmental Conservation has completed a review of your request to reconsider and or revoke the above referenced permit, and we have made the following determinations. The hydrographic survey you submitted, conducted by Robert H. Fox on June 9, 2021, is scaled at 1 inch equals 30 feet in MLLW data. The hydrographic survey received from the homeowner, conducted by William T. Hogan on July 14, 2020, is scaled at 1 inch equals 20 feet in NAVD 88 data. In comparing these surveys, so the DEC is aware of the various datum that may or may not coincide. In comparing these surveys on a similar scale and datum, it appears that minus 2.5 MLLW at the piling on the 2021 survey is analogous to, if not actually a little bit deeper than, the minus 2.5 MLW on the 2020 survey, i.e. minus 2.5 MLLW on the 2021 survey is at approximately 2.58 feet MLW, or a difference of 0.08 inch feet between MLW and MLLW. Additionally, there appears to be very little difference between the surveys when comparing the southeast corner of the house to the offshore piling line, approximately 3.5 inches, and from the house to the MHW, approximately 8 feet. The most significant change from the 2020 survey to the 2021 survey are the measurements from the house to MLW. This difference is about 5.9 feet, and the photographs submitted suggest that the intertidal zone grew approximately 6 feet seaward. The pier length permitted, 110 feet, is reasonable to achieve water depths to allow a vessel to be tied off at the MLW line instead of at the seaward end of the pier. We found that you have not cited any valid grounds for DEC to modify or revoke this permit pursuant to the Uniform Procedures Regulations, 6 NYCRR Section 621.13A. Therefore, this permit will not be modified or revoked at this time and will remain in effect. Do not hesitate to contact me at the phone number or Kimberly Lamoureux at dec.newyork.gov if you have any questions. Sincerely, Kimberly Lamoureux. And personally, I did look at those surveys, and I do believe the DEC's assessment, the piling is at the right depth. It's a little deeper, actually. And so I feel that the depth issue was thoroughly evaluated by the DEC.
Thank you. And Dr. Abrams, there was one final criteria. It doesn't apply. It's not applicable, which states that where public funds are utilized, which obviously isn't the case here, the public benefits must outweigh the long-term adverse effects. So in taking into consideration all the criteria under the general standards, which you went through, and the standards for variances, which we just discussed, as well as the additional information you provided, which you independently reviewed and considered in connection with the preparation of your report, is it your professional opinion that the applicant not only clearly satisfied the criteria for the grant of permitting by DEC and Army Corps, but independently and sufficiently satisfies the criteria for the grant of variance relief by the town of Babylon?
Yes, it's my professional opinion that this project complies with the requirements for the CPHA variance.
Good. Thank you.
Great, Councilman Gregory.
Extra question, ma'am. You had mentioned or you alluded to, and I just want to
Just
make
use the
sure-
microphone so it gets
Oh.
picked up. Yep.
I just want to make sure I understood when you first started your comments. Did you say there's a as of right as a property owner for?
So yes, so under the code, under chapter 99, it talks about regulated activities, which are regulated under the local code. So when you look specifically to the definitions, it talks about regulated activity, and it defines construction, modification, restoration, or placement of a structure or major addition. And then when it talks about unregulated activities, meaning activities not regulated under this chapter, it specifically talks about accepted activities which are not regulated, but are not limited to elevated walkways or stairways conducted solely for pedestrian use and built by an individual property owner for the limited purposes of providing non-commercial access to the beach, docks, piers, wharfs, and structures built on floats, columns, open timber piles, or other similar open work supports with a top surface area of less than 200 square feet. Meaning that docks under that 200 square feet threshold would be considered an unregulated activity, therefore not subject to the permitting and variance criteria under the code.
Yes, Mr. Porcelli.
A reasonable alternative, I don't think is an engineering thing. I think that's a matter of life, how you live. A reasonable alternative, you have a number of uses on your house. A reasonable alternative is to go rent a slip somewhere. Now, this application, the way it was advertised, is a 110-foot pier. The DEC permit says they can't build anything on it. There are no floats, there are no ramps going down to floats and anything. How are these old people and handicapped people, and I had a handicapped sister, I'm very sensitive to handicapped people, how are they going to climb from this thing down onto a boat? That's a ridiculous argument. Go to a place where they have a marina where they do have floating docks and ramps. To say that that's a basis for one of their variance criteria is ridiculous and insulting. As far as the depth goes, Dr. Abrams said he admitted it's 30 inches. Then he makes a conclusion that I think we have it. DEC looked at it. Well, he read a statement in there in a DEC letter, which said, referred to the hydrographic survey submitted by the homeowner. Where is that? I showed you what their survey was. That was not a hydrographic survey. DEC made a mistake. That's why the municipalities have the authority besides DEC. So if they make a mistake, that doesn't mean you have to rubber stamp it. You have the ability to correct it in terms of your own permit. And as of right is for the 200 square feet. This is not as of right. They have completely failed to show practical difficulties. an unnecessary hardship. And with that, I'll leave it to everyone else.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna go to the cards. Nicholas Hamo. And again, when you just come forward, just state your name and address for the record.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you for seeing us this afternoon and thank you for your patience. My name is Nicholas Hamo and I live at 85 Oak Beach Road. I've been at Oak Beach for approximately 60 years. As a young child, starting at the age of 5, we would bring our boats back, from the moorings, etc. You have to learn about the ocean. The ocean is dangerous like the mountains. You can't just build a dock and set off. It's going to teach you how to deal with life in general. So I know this beach very well, and I've been mooring my boat on it for, let's say, 50 years. I've used most of the posts. Today, it's a precarious situation at certain tides. Building a dock is not going to help you get out to sea and make everything a beautiful day. You're sharing this beach with 6, 7 houses. It's one of the only beaches left that doesn't have a dock. It's absolutely beautiful. My first question is, when I'm putting my boat here at my friend's house, am I still going to be able to do that with his dock? Because a 4-foot dock has to go out 110 feet to that post. I don't think it'll reach it. Where's my boat going to go? 6 boats go on those moorings, and when the wind blows, the boats go together with the wind, and it's not dangerous. You put a dock there, boats are going to slam right into that dock. Tides are changing all the time. It's not a good solution for the kids. Both my children, who are 15 and 17, when they heard about the dock, flipped out. They love that beach. They swim on it. They enjoy it. We're a family at the beach. We should share the beach. It's not because you have one
Just
house.
address the board.
Excuse
Address
me?
us. Address us.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, all I'm saying is we can live together. It's a community. We have a big, long, beautiful beach. By adding a dock to it, maybe you're actually destroying it. The treasure is in your garden. It's right there. It's beautiful. I think we should share the beach, help each other with the boats. The 6 mooring posts there. Is somebody going to be hampered by that dock and not be able to put his boat out? Those posts have been there for 60 years. Jed Mead's probably the one who put them in. Anyway, thank you again for hearing us. Great.
Yes, thank you. James Ferrantino.
My name is Jim Ferrantino. I live at 116 Oak Beach Road, the house right next to the discussed property. It is an unspoiled, beautiful area with no docks and just natural beauty. And I would like to see it remain that way. And the feeling if I was going to do something that all the neighbors around me objected to, I wouldn't do it. And I would really like to see it remain as it is, unspoiled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrantino. Keith Hughes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Keith Hughes. I live at 105 Brilliant Walk, Oak Beach. And I would just like to say I'm opposed to this because the negative impact on our beach, which is beautiful and accessible for everyone that lives there and uses it, is going to be diminished. All the neighbors enjoy the beach. We like to sit on it. It's not as big as we like. It would be nice to be even bigger, but it is what it is. It's going to be smaller with a dock cutting it off. To address something that somebody brought up, that the poles on the beach and the ropes across are just as difficult to get over as a 4-foot dock is a little ridiculous to me. You can step over those ropes as you walk down the beach. They're no more than a foot high. So that one I disagree with. The negative impact and the ability of us to use the beach, enjoy the entire beach, is going to be impacted by this. I feel that only Mr. Gelastino, his guests, and his renters will be benefiting from this dock, while the rest of us who use the beach will have to suffer.
I love our beach just the way it is, the waterfront to our east, and others beyond have boat docks on them. There's very little usable beach between the pilings to enjoy, to sit on chairs and tables and have friends over. That's
Great, thank you. Kathleen Hughes?
Good afternoon, Kathleen Hughes. I live at 105 Brilliant Walk, Oak Road. I'm not a scientist. I'm more of a people person, so I can't attest to depths of water. I can only attest to what I see and what I feel. Living in Oak Beach is a very unique place to live. Aesthetically, our little cove there is very unique because it doesn't have a dock. And just in a relationship way, I think what everybody is trying to express that is opposed to the dock is, I don't want to be opposed to Mr. Gelastino and his family. I don't want to cause anybody hardship. And I always kind of use the analogy that, you know, the beach is the little sandbox that we all play in, and I want everybody to play nice in the sandbox. So at this point, I've always looked at that beach as a healing place, a resting place, a restorative place, a place of simplicity. It's not Dune Road. We're not in the Hamptons. We're in Oak Beach. And I think that that's what everybody is kind of feeling. So as far as, you know, legalities and what happens with the permit and what's okay, I'm not an expert in that area. And I'm sure that's why people have brought the experts here to attest to that. I can only attest of what it's like to live there. And I want to get along nicely with all of my neighbors. I don't like people to be in disputes with one another. Part of my job every day is to mediate with people. So please, let's play nice in the sandbox and do what's best for everyone there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shannon Snyder?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, just state your name. and
Okay,
address.
so Shannon Snyder, 106 Oak Beach. I'm sort of the newest kid on the block. We lived in the area for 3 years before we purchased our house last year. We're super excited. We love it there. I live there with my son and my husband and my Newfoundland. I have 2 boats. I'm a new boater and I use the moorings with my children and my parents that are older, and we do okay. They're smaller boats because the water is very low. I just wanted to share something like that maybe has been sort of touched on. I know all of my neighbors, but I don't know you. I haven't seen you.
You have to address.
Sorry,
that.
I haven't seen them, but I've met the renters. So all summer long, when I was in the yard doing gardening, I would hear the click clack of a suitcase. Maybe they're friends. I don't know. I'm not on Airbnb looking, but I can tell you that every weekend there was somebody else in the house. And
Okay,
last
no,
summer.
Can I,
last summer.
wait? Yep,
But,
yep,
yeah.
yep. So, Ms. Commissioner, you
Yeah.
will address.
Yeah, so
us.
construction in my
Mr.
house
Gelastino, if you
started in
wanna address
October
us, you can get up
and
and-
ended in January, but I was there every weekend and I also was there all summer. I was also attacked by a dog from one of the renters, where I was like running out to the beach and fell into the sand. And, you know, I didn't make a big thing of it. We're all neighbors. We all get along. But I just want to bring up, like, I don't appreciate living in a neighborhood where every weekend there's somebody else there. Like, I want peace and quiet and a nice place to live. So.
Great, thank you. Gisela Koch McAleef.
Yeah, that's a mouthful, I know.
Gisela Koch Makloof. I live at Makloof, yes. I live at 95 Brilliant Walk in Oak Beach. I and my husband, we have lived there for the past 30 years. And I'm the avid swimmer of our community. I swim laps between the 2 jetties because further out it would be too dangerous because of boating. So between those 2 jetties, I swim forth and back 1,000 meters a day from May until including October. And I fear that my distance when swimming will be cut drastically short and I have to do many more laps. And I'm also not a scientist, but I have personally felt a difference as a swimmer. Sometimes I take a break and where the mooring is now of Mr. Gelestino, when I was, swim normally at high tide because the water is clearer. When I started, I could hardly stand in the water. I had to put myself on my toes in order to be able to stand. Now, when I'm stand at high tide, the water is about the height of my navel. So I have no measurements other than myself, but I see that there has been a difference. And aside from that, like everybody else, we love to watch our sunsets. And I do think it is entirely possible that the view of our sunsets on our very pristine beach will be obstructed by a dog. So I oppose, and I'm thankful that you are hearing us out.
Great, thank you. James Shepherd.
Good afternoon. My name is James Shepherd, and I live at 107 Oak Beach Road, and I've been living there for 21 years now. And I live one house west of the proposed pier. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this proposal, and I do so with some hesitation because I don't like to interfere in other people's plans, particularly my immediate neighbors. It's certainly not personal, but I know I would regret not making a few points. I'm also against the construction of this pier in this particular location because it will negatively affect so many people. And quite frankly, because I feel it will ruin a very good thing, a very beautiful thing. As many people have said, you've heard words like pristine. But I would like to propose that there's a good reason that this beach currently doesn't have a pier. And as mentioned, it is the last beach in Oak Beach that does not have one. I know that it might be a case for the opposing side to say, well, why not us? But I would like to propose that if you looked at Google Earth, you would notice two things about this particular beach. Besides the fact that it's the last one not to have a pier, you'll also notice that it's the most beautiful beach in Oak Beach. And that's not a personal opinion. And perhaps the reason that there's no pier on this beach is not because nobody else thought to do it, or because nobody else could afford it, or because nobody thought it would improve the value of their home, or because people don't have boats for which a pier would be a convenience, undoubtedly. Instead, the reason there's no pier on this beach is because it's a rare issue of restraint on the part of my neighbors and a wise respect for history, the history of this beach. It's a respect for natural beauty as opposed to man-made structures. And there's many people who appreciate those things. But this beach is a natural gem worthy of being an exception to all these other piers because it's rare. And here's why. Most beaches in Oak Beach are littered with cement and rebar. It was brought up because it was an erosion control effort in the 1960s. That cement has sharp rebar. There's cement the size of a car, and there's cement the size of my hands. And this makes these beaches dangerous. In that case, a pier actually provides safety. It gets people up and over the rocks off those beaches onto their boats. But this beach is an exception. For some reason, it was spared that cement rebar. I don't know why. And the result is it is a beautiful, perfect, white, soft sand beach. And we are all lucky to live on it. But I would ask, who would dare ruin that? Why would you not want that? I would like to bring to your attention that the neighbors who are fortunate enough to live near and use this beach have done so with a beautiful balance and a light touch and a light footprint. I would like to think that nobody has sought to control a section of this beach to the exclusion of others, and I'll pick up my pace.
Yeah, Jim, because we need you to wrap it up.
This day, respect for others is almost as rare as the beach itself. I would like to think that we would reward, not punish, the behavior we'd like to encourage. I would like to think the DEC would prefer not to have a dock, that the light footprint is, in the name of conservation, a better option.
Do you have something written? Because you can submit it up for the record.
I do. I have one last comment.
Sure.
Oak Beach is different than many places, okay? It's not the Hamptons, it's not private land, it's not private beaches. We share a lot of things in Oak Beach. We share water wells, we share boardwalks, we share a community center, and we share our public beaches. But every pier that gets built, everyone that gets approved, unfortunately has the effect of privatizing a beach. It is essentially a fence and it might as well have a sign that says keep out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cindy Bigelow?
Well, I'll try to be very respectful of the 3 minutes, so I do
Just
want.
state your name and address.
Cindy Bigelow, sorry, and I live 4209 Oak Beach Road, Oak Beach. And I've been a resident there for 25 years. Very quickly, just thanking you for what you're doing and giving us an opportunity to have a voice. It is a beautiful community. They are beautiful people and they do think about the greater good. So thank you for taking the time. 25 years, been there summer after summer, raising my kids there, as my father-in-law did with his children, as his father did, building a home down a half a mile. So we have a lot of history in Oak Beach. And I can tell you that community is so inclusive. As an individual that doesn't live there full time, as the same as Mr. Gelastino, all the neighbors around us and everyone in this community is actually here today or has submitted letters to you. They've always made me feel welcome, like part of the community, never that I was only a part-time person coming in the summer. And in that spirit, when we found out that a 110-foot pier was going to be built, they did, I think, what I would call that Oak Beach community way. We wrote a very thoughtful letter, and I think you have a copy of it. And if not, we'll get it for you, where we asked him, please do not, I personally handed him the letter, do not build that. It will really ruin the character of our small beach. We so appreciate it. We love the beach. You've heard everyone talk about how they use it. Gisela swimming. Jim Shapper didn't talk about his kids always coming over. Everyone clams on both sides. There are a lot of clams there, I can tell you. I know Mrs. Gelastino loves the same thing. We love going to clams and making the sauce, the whole thing. Whether, again, it's swimming, fishing, boating, everybody uses it. It is our area where we are all together. So when we wrote that letter, praying that he was going to listen to the permanent voices, not someone like myself who's only a summer resident, and unfortunately didn't, which is why we're all here today, to ask you to please not allow this variance to go through. I can tell you in my 25 years, that beach has changed. The survey does show from 2010 to 2020, that beach is bigger. There's no question about it. The accretion along the jetty in front of his house, there's no question. The photos that we have and we submitted, literally it's a mud flat between now up to his house and where that hole is. So it's definitely changed. And the hydrographic survey definitely indicates that at the end of that pier, it would be 1.4, which is not enough for a boat. So, you know, we think about this pier that he wants to put in, and if, you know, if he's able to do that, the impact that it's going to have on everybody, I just can't help but say to Mr. Gelastino, and I know I need to address you, is it really right to create this much anxiety for this small little community that cares so much about each other and work so hard to take care of each other? I can tell you so much history where they call me back in my home in Connecticut and they're telling me, oh, you know, this blew off and I got to fix this and I got to fix that. It's really a community that cares. It follows the rules. And as you've heard, I'll make it very quickly. As you've heard, rules are not something that have been followed, whether it's the deck without the DEC approval or outside its boundaries with retaining walls or renters. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Gilson, you did have renters there this summer. They tell us they're renters. They bring their dogs. I watched someone dog get attacked, one of our dogs. So it's not right to not follow the rules. All right, we try to follow the rules. And I can only ask that we hope that between the hydrographic survey and the wonderful comments that were made by Mr. Forcelli and the entire community that's asking not to build it, that you will not allow the pier to be built. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask Mr. Forcelli, you have anything final there? Because I'll give the applicant the last opportunity to.
No, that's it.
That's it? Great, thank you. Did you want to make any final comments?
I just wanted to state that we do appreciate and understand and respect all of the comments that have been made by the adjacent property owners and by the neighbors of the Gelastinos in the context of this application. The DEC permitting process took place over the course of a 2-year period of time. And this application has been pending with the town since November of last year. It has been a very long process of review and back and forth and consideration and analysis and documents. But at the end of the day, the bottom line and what the most important thing is for this board to consider is whether or not the criteria for granting this relief has been met. And the courts have been very specific for decades, if not a century, that public opposition is not a basis for denying variance relief. And in fact, many cases where the courts have found that a board considered public opposition and found that that was the basis for its determination, have overturned those decisions as being arbitrary and capricious.
So this board's very familiar with that case now? Consider public opposition.
Great. Thank
Okay?
you.
The
Thank you very
board will
much.
consider all the information that's been submitted by your side and all the information that's been submitted by Mr. Pacelli and his professionals.
Terrific. We would like to submit into evidence a copy of Mr. Abrams' curriculum vitae, as well as copies
Just hand it up to
copies
Jen.
of the report.
and
Do you
to
need
Jerry.
multiple copies or?
No, just one.
Okay.
That'll be included, and we received the minutes of all the public hearings, which include the backup that's submitted.
Okay, and then one final question. Will the public hearing be kept open while
No,
the
we're gonna
board
close
continues?
it.
Okay,
And then the board will determine, again, I'm recusing myself from voting on the application. So it will be up to the town board members whether or not they want to move it, approve it, or deny it.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Okay, you want to hand that out now? Just so she, it's part of the record. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on the second public hearing, is public hearing reference to amending chapter 3, article 2, section 3-4 of the town of Babylon Uniform Code of Traffic Ordinances. We don't have any cards, so take a motion from Councilman Netta, second by Councilman Martinez, close the reserve. All those in favor? Opposed? Hearing is closed, decision reserved. We'll go into the agenda for today. I'm sorry? Oh, on the first one, yeah, so I'll take a motion on the first public hearing to close and reserve by Councilman McSweeney, second by Councilman Gregory. All those in favor? Opposed? Hearing is closed, decision reserved. Take my comments for the second public hearing that I just read, and we close and reserve that. We have any cards for the agenda? No. So I'll take the agenda resolution 404.
I offer resolution 404. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 405.
I offer 405. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 406.
Offer resolution 406. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 407.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 408.
I offer 408. Second.
Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Mineta,
Yes.
Councilman Martinez.
Yes.
Councilman McSweeney.
Yes.
Councilman Gregory.
Yes.
Supervisor Schaefer.
And I'll abstain. Resolution is approved. 4 votes in favor, 1 abstention. Resolution 409.
I offer resolution 409. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 410.
Offer resolution 410. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 411.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Mineta,
Yes.
Councilman Martinez.
Yes.
Councilman McSweeney.
Yes.
Councilman Gregory.
Yes.
Supervisor Schaefer.
Abstain. Resolution is approved. 4 votes in favor, 1 abstention. Resolution 412.
I offer 412. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 413.
I offer 413. Second.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Mineta.
Yes.
Councilman Martinez.
Yes.
Councilman McSweeney.
Yes.
Councilman Gregory.
Yes.
Supervisor Schaefer.
Abstain. Resolution is approved. 4 votes in favor, 1 abstention. Resolution 414.
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 415.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 416.
I offer 416. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 417.
I offer 417. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 418.
Offer resolution 418. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 419.
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 420.
I offer 420. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 421.
I offer 421. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. Resolution 422.
Offer
resolution 422.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 423.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 424.
I offer 424.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 425.
I offer 425.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 426.
Offer resolution 426.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 427.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 428.
Offer 428. Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 429.
I offer 429.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 430.
I offer 430.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 431.
Offer resolution 431.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 432.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 433.
I offer resolution 433.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 434.
I offer 434.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 435.
Offer resolution 435.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 436.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All's in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 437.
I offer resolution 437.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 438.
I offer 438.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 439.
Offer resolution 439.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 440.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 441.
I offer resolution 441.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. Resolution 442.
I offer resolution 442.
All in favor? Opposed, resolution is approved. And resolution 443.
Offer resolution 443.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, resolution is approved. That's it for the resolutions. We have any cards for the open portion? So I take a motion to adjourn from Councilman Martinez, second by